I'm back like I never left. Inflation increased this month. What are we going to do? We're going to talk about it right now so you can be fully educated. Let's go. What's going on, my good people? Otis L. Milton here, the Mortgage Millennial, and I'd like to welcome you back to the Millennial Mindset channel. Over here, what we do is we help you elevate through the mindset so you continue to grow and build wealth through real estate and other avenues. So today we're going to be talking about inflation, recession, everything that's happening. Part two of Inflation 101, because there's so much information out there, and I want you to be aware of it all so you can make the best decisions for you and your family. So before we get started, I want to make sure that I qualify myself. I am a real estate and mortgage professional. I've been in the industry coming up on 10 years now. I've done over 150 transactions, over $25 million in production. So I'm qualified to do this. I study the markets for an actual living, help tons of clients build wealth as well. So this is not just, I didn't just get on Google University or YouTube University. This is actual information and my actual expertise. So let's jump right into it, right? This week, the CPI report came out, and the CPI report is the measurement or the metric of how inflation is gauged, right? And so last month, that report came out, and it came out saying inflation was at 8.6%. And this week, it actually came out saying that inflation has increased by another 0.5%. And we are now at 9.1% inflation. So that's tough, right? Some of us thought it might go down. Some of us thought it might rise a little bit. It's a little bit more than a lot of the experts anticipated it would rise. But nonetheless, it is up, right? And it's actually up higher than 9.1 because there are some very important pieces that are not included in the CPI metric report. Food and energy being, the two that are not included. And the last time you've been to the grocery store, I know for me, it costs more for absolutely everything at the grocery store, and I'm afraid to look at my energy bill. So, especially with it being summertime here in California. So those things are not included. So there's a good chance that this inflation number is actually much higher than the 9.1 that is reported. So with that being said, we'll save that for another topic in another video. So let's talk a little bit about some of those things, why we think that inflation is continuing to increase and has it peaked. Is this the highest that it will get? Are we going to start to see it trickle down? How are the markets reacting to it, right? The mortgage market, the mortgage bond market, the stock market, the crypto market. We'll talk a little bit about those things and how they are reacting to this. Now, the real interesting part about all of this is that while we are having this tough economic times, and we're really in the beginning stages of it, really haven't gotten fully into it, but I mean, we're into it enough to where we're seeing the impact in different places, right? So we are seeing some layoffs. At the same time, we're seeing people hiring across the board. So all of that's really interesting because unemployment's at its lowest it's been in a very long time. We are under 4% across the United States in terms of unemployment, right? Jobless claims are down, et cetera. But at the same time, we are seeing some companies lay off. And so what's really interesting about that is you have a split mindset in the market right now in terms of corporations, in terms of businesses across the board. Some businesses are like, hey, they see the writing on the wall. It looks like, hey, there could be really, really, really tough times ahead. So we need to cut down some of our fat and our spending. And so we're seeing some layoffs, right? But what's really interesting is that right now, corporate profits are at an all-time high, right? An all-time high. Corporations currently hold over $4 trillion of profits currently. That's a lot of money, right? But at the same time, we're seeing layoffs, at least in the real estate and mortgage industry. We've seen a lot of companies come through layoffs. And so at the same time, we're seeing other companies that are hiring right now, right? I see tons of signs now hiring, seeking help as I go throughout different parts of the city, et cetera. So that is currently happening. And that's really interesting because normally when you get into a recession, you see a lot of companies start to cut their costs down. And so what happened was because the corporate profits are so high, there's an abundance of money that a lot of companies have. And so you're seeing companies trying their best to keep their employees in the door because they have a surplus of money. So they'll kind of keep that. Some of them are maybe being a little bit more conservative and they're getting rid of it immediately as they see the first sign. The thing is, the reason why I think that's happening is because nobody knows what's happening. This economic downturn, if you will, that we're currently in or approaching, is something like we haven't seen before. And so people don't know how to respond. Even CEOs of corporate companies, Fortune 500 companies across this country don't know what to do because they don't know what's coming. None of us have a crystal ball. We just have our expertise. We do the knowledge. I mean, we get the knowledge, we do the research, and we try to inform ourselves and, inform our consumers and our spheres of influence. So, but to be honest with you, nobody knows. And that's why we're seeing this kind of different mindset and different strategy across the board in terms of what corporations are doing as we are, quote unquote, approaching this recession. Now, and before we do that, I want to give you guys a definition of what GDP is. It is the gross domestic product, okay? And so that number, as that number rolls back, when you have 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP is when you fall into a recession, okay? So let's take a little timeline trip. Fourth quarter of 2021, our GDP was at 6.9%, okay? Let's go into the first quarter of this year, 2022. The GDP fell down all the way to 1.6%, right? In second quarter that we just got out of, GDP went down to 1.5. There you go, 2 consecutive quarters where GDP is decreasing. By definition, we are now in a recession. Now, our policymakers and government officials are not going to come out and say that immediately because it will turn into franticness, right? It will turn into scarcity and people will start to react, companies start to react, and we'll see mass layoffs, right? And so when we look at 2008, right, and we went through that recession, the Great Recession, if you will, once the recession was announced, millions of people lost their jobs in the matter of a month or two. And so the government doesn't want to come out and shock you guys like that and shock the country, but I'm here to tell you, by definition, we are now currently in a recession, okay? That's a fact. It's proven. You can look this information up. I'll even drop something down here for you guys to check out. So by definition, we are currently in a recession. GDP declined 2 consecutive quarters. So let's talk about this recession that's coming or that we're in, however you want to look at it. And let's talk about how the markets across the board are responding to this, okay? As we can see, if you paid any attention, if you invest in stocks or crypto whatsoever, those markets are responding extremely negative to all of this stuff that's happening in the economy, right? All of this GDP fall, etc. They're not liking it, right? The stock market is taking a huge hit. Crypto is in shambles right now, right? Now, one market that I assume that would may respond a little negatively because they did so once the Feds announced their rate hike the last month and the CPI report came out where it was last month. The mortgage market really didn't like that, and we've seen a huge spike in rates almost immediately. Now, this week, inflation grew again, the CPI report came out again, but the mortgage market did not respond negatively. Mortgage market and mortgage bonds are trading well. The market was actually up 30 basis points today, right? Meaning interest rates are actually a little bit better today, even after we got the report saying that inflation is growing. So this is something I will definitely keep my eye on, and you should too, because again, some of our major markets responding differently to this. Again, nobody knows what's happening because this quote unquote financial downturn is not like one we've seen before. Because if we go back to what I said in the last video, part 1 of this is a lot of the issues that we are having right now in terms of our economy stems from what happened during the pandemic, okay? We had large amounts of money printed. Trillions of dollars of money were printed to stimulate the economy, to help Americans get by, pay their rent, continue their living, right? And so if we look at some numbers, if we look at 2020, March of 2020, spending was out of this world. March of 2020. Americans had a large amount of disposable income at that time. Probably because most of them weren't paying their rent or their mortgage because they got a forbearance or whatever the case may be. But disposable income was up dramatically, and that has dropped almost 35% from 2020, March of 2020 to June to July 2022. So people's, fund money, right? Spend money, if you will, has cut down drastically. Unfortunately, I think that's going to continue to happen because simply everything costs more. So yes, we're still spending, but it's not that we're necessarily buying more. It's that what we're buying costs more, right? And so a lot of sales are still up in retail, but it's a facade because they're just charging you more for the same item. They're not selling more items. And so once, the metric actually picks that up, I don't know if they haven't already, but nonetheless, once they actually pick that up, we're going to see some different numbers in terms of retail. And I am interested to see what happens as we go into the holiday season and see how spending is, because a lot of people's credit card debt is up to the maximum, right? Credit card debt across America is at its all-time high, right? So people have turned to credit cards to subsidize their living and their lifestyle, et cetera. They had happy hour buying the drinks with the credit card and paying a minimum balance, right? And so I would advise you, okay, as someone that advises people on their finances, this is not a time to carry a large balance because you're going to pay higher interest. Check your credit card and see what your current interest rates are. I'm seeing as high as 30% on some credit cards. So be careful because that cheeseburger could cost you 30% more than whatever you paid for it, especially if you don't pay it off for that interest rate. So this is very, very interesting time, and it is very fluid. A lot of things are happening at one time. So again, I'll be bringing a part 3 of this, and then we're going to talk a little bit more directly about what all of this means for housing, because it seems like the housing market is responding a little bit more positively than the other markets like stock and crypto, et cetera. So that'll be part 3. I hope you learned something. If you didn't, watch it again because I told you something you should have learned from, okay? And so I'm gonna get out of here. You know my motto, people. Until the next time, one love.